LEGO Star Wars 2 is a game that this channel is very familiar with. Well, at least with the weird DS version. But the DS version wasn't the only handheld version of LEGO Star Wars 2 that was made. And no, we're not talking about LEGO Star Wars 2 on the Game Boy Advance, but don't worry, I'll get to that one day. In this video, we're going to look at the PSP version of LEGO Star Wars 2. And you guys might be wondering, why are we looking at this game since it's pretty much just like the console game? But as we'll see in this video, there are some very interesting differences in this. So without further ado, go ahead and remember to like and subscribe. And leave a comment because it really helps the channel out in the algorithm, and I really love hearing what you guys have to say about my videos. But without further ado, let's go ahead and look at LEGO Star Wars 2 on the PSP. So unlike the other handheld versions of this game is pretty much identical to the console version. And that's because to do the PSP version, TT Games actually did it in-house instead of hiring another company to do it. And that's probably because most PS2 games at the time could just be ported down to the PSP pretty easily. So that way TT Games didn't have to completely remake the game from the ground up. And they already had Amaze Entertainment working on the Game Boy Advance and the DS ports of this game, so it's probably good they didn't give them another version to work on. And you know, TT Games did a pretty good job scaling this game down. Now yes, there are some issues we're going to look at. All in all, this is pretty good. And since I'm using an emulator to get this footage, I have the quality way up so it looks a lot better. So there's really nothing else to say about how this game is similar to the console version, so let's see how this is different. As I mentioned earlier, this game was scaled down, so you guys have probably noticed that a lot of these textures are really low res. And while yes, on the PSP it didn't really look that bad at all, on an emulator and playing it on PC you kind of really notice how low res these textures are. There's some parts of the game where it doesn't really look that bad, but then there's others where it's really noticeable. I did notice that there was something weird about the scaling though. Some textures are scaled down way more than others, like the studs where they're kind of blurry and the colors are really washed out, or the grappling points where you can't even tell what that is. And then you have textures like the picture that Vader shows Luke on Bespin, and it's almost just as good as the console version. Now I'm not a game developer, so I couldn't tell you what goes into deciding which textures get scaled down or not, but it is kind of weird that some are and others aren't. But this still isn't a problem for people to actually play on the PSP, it's only for people that emulate it like me. Now just because I say this was a good port over to the PSP doesn't mean that there aren't any issues. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few of those. But like I said earlier, I'm on an emulator, so your experience may vary on an actual PSP. So first off, we're going to look at some of the graphical issues. Now these issues are more likely to be caused by the emulator than the other issues, but I just thought to mention them anyway. So you guys out there that have actually played this game on the PSP, let me know down in the comments if these issues actually happened on the PSP or not. You know, probably one of the first issues I noticed was the facial expressions in this kind of tend to glitch out. I've noticed this happening more with Leia than the other characters, but I have seen it happen to other characters. It kind of looks like the textures on the face almost like clip into the character model. I don't really know what causes this, but it is kind of weird and I haven't noticed it in any of the other versions. I did notice here on Cloud City that there was this weird black smoke that would rise up. It almost looks like the particle effects for the smoke is broken. I haven't seen this problem on any other level, so I think it's just a problem with that. Another problem that I can't really confirm is that I've heard a lot of people saying that they had really bad lag in this version of the game. Now that wouldn't be too surprising to hear because a lot of games that were ported down to say a PSP or even a Wii usually had quite a bit of frame rate issues. But like I said, I can't really confirm whether or not that was actually the case. Another thing that they did to help scale the game down was limiting how many sounds can be played at one time. If you turn the music off in the game, which unless you're recording this stuff like me, I really don't know why you would do that, you notice that whenever you destroy something or get studs, sometimes those sounds cut out because there's too many things going on at one time. Now I don't know if the PSP had some sort of hardware requirement that only allowed a certain amount of sounds to be played at one time, or if this was just another way they could scale the game down so it would run on the PSP, but it is kind of annoying just having sounds randomly cut out. Now obviously I can't demonstrate this since you have to have the music on, and I don't want YouTube to take away the monetization on this video just because I have a 2-second clip of Star Wars music in it. So I guess you're just gonna have to take my word for it. Now I did also notice a couple other bugs that weren't related to scaling, so let's get into those. Now one of the most annoying bugs that I found is that the studs just randomly disappear sometimes. So whenever you destroy an object, the studs pretty much act like they normally would in the console versions. They either stay really collected or just spread out, but sometimes whenever they spread out, they either just disappear or fly through walls. You know, it kind of reminds me what they did in LEGO Star Wars the video game, where you would be trying to get the super kit because it wasn't called True Jedi yet, and you would destroy an object and just watch all of your studs go right through a wall. So it's interesting that this bug just stuck around in the PSP version. Another problem with the studs that you'll find is that you'll just find them in walls or in rocks or any other objects in the world. It's almost like these studs have just been placed wrong, or in the scaling process the world just kind of clipped into where the studs were at. I mean, I have seen this issue a few times in the GameCube and PS2 version, but it's a much more common occurrence to see it in this version. Alright, so the last issue I'm going to talk about in this game, so I don't make this video only about the problems and issues in this, is actually kind of a weird one. What I'm talking about is that whenever you play the Empire Strikes Back levels, it sounds like the Star Wars theme plays for like a split second whenever you go between rooms. I really don't know what causes this, but here's what it sounds like. Alright, so enough with the issues with this game, let's go ahead and see how this game was different to the console version. And believe it or not, they did add a few interesting things, so let's take a look at those. One of the first differences that you notice is that the Bounty Hunter mission door is unlocked right off the bat, but instead of having Bounty Hunter missions, you have 3 of the prequel boss battles. Now believe it or not, I have actually made a video about this before, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to talk about it again. So after this video is over, feel free to go check that one out. So these 3 boss battles are pretty much ripped straight from the original LEGO Star Wars game, and it was an almost perfect port over. It has some weird bugs and graphical issues, but all in all they do play pretty well. I assume the Bounty Hunter missions just couldn't fit on the PSP version, so I guess so we could have a replacement, this was a good choice. And you know, in a way I almost wish this was ported over to the console version, because that would have been pretty cool if we could do this on the GameCube. And you know, if they did make this part of the main console game, they might have put more effort into making it more of a perfect recreation, other than just quickly putting something together so they could just fill the void. This next edition is almost just as interesting, and that's that this game has the challenge modes from the complete saga. Now if you don't know what this challenge mode is, pretty much in each level you have a different challenge mode where you have to go find these blue mini kits. And to add an extra layer of challenge, you have to do it in a certain amount of time. And due to the size of some of these levels, these challenges can be really hard. Now for whatever reason, the challenge mode was not added to the console version. Now I don't know if the developers just put this in the PSP version, or if maybe they were testing the challenge mode to eventually put in the complete saga. But either way, even though I don't enjoy playing it sometimes, I think it's a really good addition, and I'm glad it at least got put in the PSP version. Another change that you probably noticed as soon as you launched a new game is this weird thing next to the Cantina shop. Now if you don't know what this is just how you connect through multiplayer. Now besides the Amaze Entertainment ports, this is the only version to not have drop-in and drop-out multiplayer, so you have to connect through this connection screen. Now unfortunately, since I'm on an emulator, I have no way to do this, or see how the multiplayer even was, but I have heard some stories about it. And what I've heard is that it can be really buggy and super unreliable and just drop connection randomly. So if that's the case, that's really unfortunate, because the ability to play co-op is probably one of the best things about the LEGO franchise. And if the ability to play multiplayer is just broken in this game, that's a really bad mark on this game, because one of its biggest selling points is that it's co-op. And you know, this may be one of the reasons why the next title, LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga, was never put on the PSP, and why later titles like LEGO Pirates of the Caribbean and LEGO Star Wars 3 were single-player versions only. Now I do know that the PSP versions of LEGO Batman and LEGO Indiana Jones were kind of like this game, in that they were just port overs from the console version, but I'm not sure if they suffered the same problems. But yeah, that's all I really got for this game. I've probably forgot about a few small things, but all in all, I think I mentioned all of the major stuff in this video. So I hope you enjoyed this short video. It took me way longer than it should have to make this, but it was actually pretty hard to come up with stuff to say about this game. But if you liked this video, please leave a like, and if you want to see more content like it in the future, please subscribe. See you guys in the next one.